Well, I've got 6:33, so we probably better go. We got a lot to cover and talk about tonight. One of the things I want to mention, because we're talking about Generation Z students, so obviously we have some of our own, some of them are y'all's kids. So I had the opportunity to teach middle school and high school on Wednesday night last winter for about 10 weeks. And I haven't taught that age in a long time because last time I taught it, my kids were that age. So it's been several years. I mean, it was a little unnerving to me because it's just, I taught college students, but I'm not used to teaching middle school and high school. So I ended up doing some stuff on personality theory. I gave them Myers-Briggs type indicator. I later gave them the Enneagram. We talked about personality theory. So here, I just wrote down this afternoon, what are my takeaways? I'm spending 10 weeks with these kids. What are my takeaways? So here's my takeaways. They asked good questions and really engaged the material well. That was very apparent to me. They stayed after class was over and we'd stay another 30 minutes talking about some of this stuff. That really impressed me. I thought that was really good. I found them to be, all of them across the board, to be very intelligent and very articulate. One of the criticisms you'll hear of this generation is they've got their nose stuck in an iPhone and therefore they don't do well in interpersonal communication, just talking to people. I did not find that to be the case with these students at all. They communicate one-on-one very well, they communicate well in a group, and that speaks well for many of y'all in here. I found they were very easy to engage conversation with. Now, I had to ask them what is, there's a bit of a communication breakdown because language changes and references change. So I had to ask, so it was a good kind of educational experience for me to keep me up to date. Now here's what's really meaningful, and this is really my objective of this class. I see these students at church, like even as recently as last Wednesday night, and they'll engage in conversation with me. They'll come up to me and start a conversation, which I find amazing. These are 15, 16-year-olds, and that's pretty impressive to me, that they'll come up and start a conversation. That's definitely intergenerational. I mean, I'm 2 generations removed from them, not just one, I'm 2 removed. So I think intergenerational communication and relationships can be a reality and can be a lot of fun too. And there's no reason for us to say, oh, we have this generational chasm and we can't have meaningful relationships. I think that's a cop-out. I really think it can happen. I'm really optimistic. And my experience with them last winter raised the bar on the optimism a lot. I feel much better. I just thought this was exciting. This is really fun. So that's my objective in this class. So one of the things I want to do beginning tonight, I feel like last week I covered a lot of material, and I went home and thought, it's a little bit negative. I really want to focus more on being solution focused and brainstorming and thinking about ideas. And so I'm really in that mode tonight to be a little more corrective. And I think the image I would use is, how can we build bridges? Because the generational differences are there, so it necessitates building a bridge. You got to be willing to build a bridge. And so I saw a deal on Facebook yesterday, and it had a picture of this guy, he had long hair, and he said, I don't often see smoke, but when I do, it's on the water. Okay, who gets that? The baby boomers in here get that. It took me just a minute. It just took just a second, and I thought, oh wow. Then I was singing the song in my head the rest of the day. But it took me just a second. I thought, oh, you dummy, you're a baby boomer. You're supposed to know that. So there's definitely the chasm, but it can be. So this is where we left off last week. A university created a safe space where anyone who felt triggered could recuperate and get help. The room was equipped with cookies, coloring books, bubbles, Play-Doh, calming music, pillows, blankets, and a video of frolicking puppies, as well as students and staff members trying to deal with trauma. Okay, so I think you could argue both sides of this. Fidel brought out a very appropriate point as we were wrapping up last week. In some of these institutes of higher learning are very intense academically. The pressure is on these kids like you cannot imagine, to the point suicide rates are high because of the academic pressure. So Fidel said, he's arguing, hey, this is a good thing. I grew up in a home where my dad was a GI generation, World War II vet, and the phrase that I heard repeatedly growing up is, you'll be all right. It didn't make any difference what you experienced or what you were doing or what was going on. It's the same phrase, you'll be all right. So I contrast my experience growing up with this. Now, I'm not saying my experience is necessarily all good. And telling somebody that you'll be all right no matter what. I'm not saying that's all good all the time. Probably is good. So we could argue both sides of the inherent value of this. I'm going to take it a step further. One student who sought out the safe space put it this way: I was feeling bombarded by a lot of viewpoints that really go against my dearly and closely held beliefs. Okay, so he's hearing viewpoints that he can't reconcile with what he believes, my dearly and closely held beliefs. And so his reaction was to seek out a safe space. In other words, away from that. Okay, I want to take it one more step before we discuss it. One should be, that what these two authors are saying is a trend we're seeing in our culture, especially Generation Z. The trend is one should be safe not just from car accidents and sexual assault, but from people who disagree with you. So you should be safe from them and go off your little island. Okay, now, I really was convicted by this because my first reaction was we've got to teach our kids critical thinking. In other words, they've got to learn how to think through things, and they've also got to learn, whether you're in a university environment listening to a professor whom you disagree with, or with fellow students you disagree with, or you're in the job place, you're in the workplace, you're going to encounter people from multiple viewpoints. You're going to have to learn to function with those. That's a life skill. That was my immediate reaction. And then I thought, oh, John, I'm not sure that I've really practiced this well, because I sent all three of my boys to a Christian university to get an education. Now, Mitchell chose to finish at A&M. He went to Oklahoma Christian for a year. Yeah, Brandon went to ACU. Daniel graduated from Oklahoma Christian. Now, why do you think I sent those kids to a Christian school, to a Christian university?
For the peers.
Okay, protect them. I want them to hear, I want them to sit in a classroom and have Christian professors who are coming from a Christian worldview. And I want them to be around other Christians. You know, that was a core value we had. And here I'm saying, no, you should not, you have to be safe from people who disagree with you. So in a sense, by making that choice, I'm being inconsistent.
You sent them to a giant safe space.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking, now the reality is that a Christian university is not a bubble, and I know that. I live in the real world. I went to 2 Christian schools. I know it's not a bubble. So you think about sending your student off to a state university, and you're thinking about what they're going to experience and their experience, and got to rethinking that whole thing. And I thought, if I was a parent today, maybe I would do that just because they need to learn. That's the real world. So I think you can argue both sides of this. But the point these authors are trying to make is, by overprotecting our kids and telling them, oh, you have to be safe from people who disagree with you, you're not doing a good job preparing them for the real world. Because in the real world, you're going to have to, you're going to encounter that. People that are coming from all kinds of viewpoints. When I was a freshman at Tech, I had a biology professor, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 o'clock, who hardcore non-theism, non-creationism, hardcore evolution. This guy was very much a non-theistic guy when it came to biology. And of course, I was 18 years old. I was just a knucklehead, and I didn't know my head from a hole in the ground. And now I didn't take him seriously because I thought did competitive debate in high school, and I remember listening to some of his presentations thinking, your arguments are lame. and of course, when I tell him that in class, I wasn't that nervy. But that was he was one of the first professors I had in a university setting at 18 years old. And I was just I was more interested in the girl sitting next to me than I was him, and so I wasn't really paying attention. I wasn't that engaged in academics anyhow. But he was somebody who that's a different view than what I had. So I'm just curious what y'all's reaction is. This is a new definition of safety that has come along with those who are parenting students that are members of Generation Z. Casey, what do you think?
I kind of wonder, what do they see when we're around people that disagree with us?
Oh, so expand on that a little bit.
Well, some of us surround ourselves with people that are like-minded and
Right.
follow people that are like-minded, and we watch the news that we like that is like-minded,
Right.
and then we send our kids off, and they are feeling unsafe because we've surrounded ourselves with people that are like-minded instead of challenging ourselves as well. Perhaps I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, I'm convicted, because I'm just like you. I probably hung out with people, for the most part, that were like-minded, and, you know, who my kids been exposed to? Well, my profession had been exposed to lots of church folks, because of, professionally speaking.
But would you say, back in your day, if you disagreed with someone, you were cut off? And I think there's a big difference today. Everything is so divisive
Oh,
that
yeah.
if you don't, even with like-minded people, if you don't agree with everything or you do something different, you're condemned, you're chastised, and you're left out. There's no, we don't know, the disagreement's fine, it's the how we're not teaching our kids anything by how we're all acting in disagreements.
So, and I would add, when there's disagreement, we do it fast.
Yes.
Don't we do it fast?
And if you believe one thing, then you must be this all the way across.
And so you're labeled.
And you're assumed to be that way.
Yeah.
And that's with my peers. So you can only imagine, I think, as that's being passed down, that's all they're seeing from their parents is, well, I don't agree with that completely. Well, then you must be all the way this way. No, that's not what I said. And then you're just done. It's done.
And that's what they're seeing modeled by their parents.
Oh, that's true.
They don't see being able to disagree and be civil, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And
And
agree
still
to
have a
disagree.
fundamental respect for each other.
Yeah. And that's what's being modeled.
It's like a virtue to them to be demonstrative with their outrage. So it's a disagreement isn't quite what a disagreement was when I was a kid. Today, if somebody disagrees, they're gonna stand up and yell, la 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 la, so everybody can see that outrage and
So-
jump on
And then it becomes a pack mentality thing, which is really.
it. So in a weird way, the disagreement thing is different.
It's a phrase I've used, Kelly, especially in social media. I don't post political stuff or things like that in social media because social media is so void of rational discourse.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if Kelly and I sit down and talk and we can eye to eye and we have some disagreements, like we'll say, let's on politics, that I think we could hash it out and we might even get a heated discussion when it's all done, it's all good. But if that happened in social media before it's all over with, things go downhill fast because the rational discourse never got off the ground.
So I want to back up to your point about sending your kids to a non-Christian college. Personally, I feel like we lived a little bit of this with, it was like a human experiment with our oldest son. We sent him to Bacchus Elementary, okay? We heard all the downside of Bacchus. From a Christian standpoint, we said we can send our kid, he can be a bright light in a dark place. So reversing from that, let's shelter him, let's kick him out to the real world. However, the drawback I saw and the one regret I have is he developed no meaningful relationships because people were so different. I mean, and if you want to put it on an economic level, if you want to put it on a morality level, I mean, it was across the board. It was really hard for him to find. I mean, he had a couple of good relationships, but other than that, just those meaningful ones there where we moved him in a new school where parents were kind of more like-minded and lifestyle was more like. And the kid thrived from a relationship standpoint and never wanted to go back. So
I've always admired Charles' decision to do that too. I always thought it was really,
I think
and
people thought we were crazy.
knowing your oldest,
I think you're crazy.
I think he could make friends with a rattlesnake. And I have a sneaking suspicion as he gets older, he will look back at that and that will be formative for him. I really think so because of his personality and who he is. He has such a tender heart and has such good people skills.
It's already been touched on by a lot of people, but the fact that the way that is worded indicates that there is a negative, that disagreement is inherently negative. And
Okay.
I disagree with that.
So-
So it's going back to what
Yeah,
I was
so
writing
disagree,
about.
I think that's correct. Disagreement is not, I love to, when I say love to argue about meaningful subjects, I love to have rational discourse. Let's get.
Was that iron sharpening iron?
Yeah, it is. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Let's dig down. And, you know, I love that stuff.
And sitting around the kitchen table or sitting around the dinner table is a great way to do that, where the kids can see the adults doing that, because, I mean, obviously, all spouses don't agree 100% on
I have
everything.
to tell you,
But there have been times, there have been times where the kids have looked at us like, is everything okay? No, we're just having a lively discussion, you know?
my debate partner in high school came from a large family, and he's a year older than me, and he asked me to go home to eat a meal with his family, and they're all gathered around this big table. His dad was a professor at Tech and a retired Air Force colonel. And so the whole clan's gathered around. Scott was the youngest in the family, and I mean, we're sitting down to the meal, and it launched. And they started talking about politics and current events, and it got heated. And man, even his mom engaged in it. They're all going at it. I'm like, yay. I mean, I was shell-shocked. And then when they got done with the meal, they're like, oh, that was great. And it pushed back, it was another day of paradise for them. And I figured out after I've been over there several times, they enjoyed that. It was discord. It was, you know, I wasn't used to that because it was just, I mean, they're going at it. But it was, and once I got to know them, I grew to love them a lot. They were like family to me.
On one of the people on TV I heard one time, and I thought it kind of made sense, that a lot of times, like you're talking siblings, we know we always go head to head, but you walk away, there's some of the people you love the very most, and it was saying, a lot of times a sibling prepares you for marriage, that you can disagree, but know, okay, you know, we're gonna be fine, that kind of thing. And so I think, like I say, certain families, it is more than others, but I have a debating family too, on my mother's side, and, you know, it wasn't that heated, but everybody talked, then, okay, now,
It's
what
all
are you
they're all
gonna do
happy.
here, you know, just on with
They
the day.
were an extraordinary family. The colonel would say, John, you want some more mashed potatoes? You know, he tried to be polite. Oh, no, thank you. Good, more for me. You know, I mean, there was no sense of civility about them at all. But boy, when I assisted with both his mom and his dad's funeral, and they passed away, and we gathered around that table the night before his mom's funeral. And it was pretty sacred. Those were sacred experiences. So,
John, if I may, one size doesn't fit all.
true.
And that's the dilemma we find ourselves in. One size doesn't, my children don't mature at exactly the same time, the same age. The other thing, I'm concerned, debating with a college professor, hearing things come from a professor is different from hearing them come from a peer.
That's true.
And it's kind of like getting in the ring with somebody who outweighs you 200 pounds. Or you don't put junior high boys at the senior level of football. There's got to be some maturity occur there before they can hold their own, so to speak. And our kids just don't reach it. They reach freshman year in college at about the same time. They don't reach it at the same time with the same ability to handle it.
And that's what professors and university administrators will confirm that.
Well, what concerns me about Generation Z is if the trait keeps on continuing where people are seeking safe spaces and they're seeking to ostracize themselves from others who do have a differing opinion from them. People are denying themselves personal growth. I mean,
Oh,
that confrontation
absolutely.
is essential.
I completely agree.
Yeah, you're denying yourself.
You've got to expose yourself to different people, and so I've got to tell one of myself, and I may have told this last spring. I went to a minister's retreat in Chicago several years ago, and the retreat was going on when the 6 Dallas officers were killed. And so the people leading the retreat said, John, we know your background in law enforcement chaplaincy. In our worship tonight, would you speak to it from that perspective? Yeah, I'd love to. And there was a black lady coming from a totally different perspective, and they asked her to speak too. And so I listened to her, and I thought a lot of what she said was really off base, and it kind of steamed me. No, it didn't kind of steam me, it really steamed me. And I thought, she doesn't know what she's talking about, this is dumb, you know, I did not verbalize any of this, but I'm thinking it. So I went to another event it was an Enneagram training event in Michigan about 6 months later. And I go in and we're at these round tables, kind of like we have out here, and I sit down at my round table, I've got my little folder ready to get started. And guess who comes in and sits next to me? This same lady. I'm like, a week? If she sits next to me every day, I got a week of this. So during the course of the week, we start talking, and we start visiting, and we start getting better acquainted, and I start listening, and she's listening to me, and by the end of the week, I think I've made a new friend. And she's a professor in Philadelphia, at a university in Philadelphia, and she's so far to the left politically, she fell off into the ocean. And, but she is a delightful, neat lady, and I value her as a friend. She and I are serving on the board of a nonprofit together, and we're just hysterical. And she is as cool as she can be. Now we are in terms of our background, but she tolerates me and I tolerate her, and I think we have a fundamental respect for each other. And she's very intelligent, very articulate, and but I was forced into it. I didn't do it on purpose. She came and sat by me, so I didn't have any choice. I had to be nice, you know. But what I was thinking that first day, I'm thinking, get me out of here, you know. But the Lord works.
Well, you said something really important there, and that's that you listened. And I think one of the trends that we see now with Generation Z and just that intergenerational communication is assumptions being made, which is really easy to do no matter what generation you come from. That's a human failing, is to assume. And so one of the things that I've learned through counseling in my life that I think is extremely wise, no matter what kind of relationship you're dealing with, is that, okay, so what I hear you saying is, because a lot of times when you say that, and they're saying, no, that's not at all what I'm saying. And so you can, if you're both humble and willing to go back and forth and actually intently listen and communicate what you are hearing, not just what you think you heard, but this is what I think you're saying, okay, yes or no, that is, then you can actually get somewhere in your communication.
And I think what you're describing has to take place in person, having dialogue in person, not electronically.
Right.
In person, with a real human being. And we're missing that too. We've got to create, I think, opportunities to develop community in person. We need to be with people and not do all this electronically, because electronic communication tends to foster miscommunication anyhow. But if you can actually put your feet under the table with somebody for a week, things change. And you know, some views of just some things about some racial things. We had some racial related conversations, and it was very eye-opening to me. You know, I never viewed myself as being racist, but I tell you, I learned some things that I needed to learn. I heard some things that I had not heard before, and I needed to hear those things. And they were humbling, and it was good for me, and I grew.
A lot of the context I'm hearing though is like one-on-one, so this is you and this woman.
Yeah,
so
and we're just talking at breaks, because we're
if she-
listening to the presenter, but we're talking on our breaks and interacting and unpacking the material that we're hearing.
If she had had or she or you had a group of like-minded individuals, and either side would the conversation have maintained the same civility. Like with these kids, it's usually group versus one. It's hardly ever one-on-one. So there's this.
And what do we do as adults if we go into a strange social environment, like a conference or a training thing? You go look and somebody kind of looks like you. I'm gonna go sit by that guy. Oh, he looks to be about my age. You know, he looks. You know, we kind of. You just get that sense. You're not gonna go pick out somebody that's different age, different gender, whatever. You're not gonna naturally do that. I think I'm real open-minded like that, but not as open-minded as I think I give myself credit.
Some of these teams, or at least my team that I have, Elizabeth's more than I think, we can get into some pretty heated discussions, and it looks like we're on the opposite side of the field. I'm thinking, I'm doing the best I can, it's not working. And then I turn around and hear him say something, and I said to him, like, use your head for something other than the hat rack. Yeah, so,
Yeah, I know.
they sometimes listen.
I know, Billy, I'm sure my mother was convinced that nothing she said sunk in. I had said things in the last 6 months that literally came out of my mother's mouth, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I just done? And I was with my sister the other day, and I told her I was catching myself, and she said, yeah, she said, I've heard you say a few things that came right out of her mother's mouth, So, I think this is one objective. Okay, so we're filtering this through a Christian viewpoint. This passage, in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, attitude. Keeping a clear conscience so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slanders. It's better, if it's God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. So I think the concept from a Christian worldview is that even with our faith, we want to be able to be prepared, to be able to articulate our faith, but to have a conversation, a dialogue with people that's characterized by gentleness and respect, rational discourse. And so I think that's one thing I want to prepare our children to do, is to root them in their faith, but root them to do where you have the ability to converse with all kinds of people, because their world is far more diverse than my world I grew up in. And they're going to have those opportunities to have, I think, those really good, meaningful dialogues. And so I want them to be thoughtful, I want them to be well prepared, but I don't want them to be arrogant either, where they're shoving something down somebody's throat in an arrogant, self-righteous sort of manner. Nor do we want to be that way. I want to be able to have a respectful conversation with somebody regardless of where they're coming from.
I think something else we have to remember, which is happening all the time, is that, teenagers, their parents are stupid, So when we, Brian and I don't think it's any secret, are very conservative, and Reed is not. Like, some of the stuff that he has said to us is not fall in line with what, that's okay. He needs to figure out things on his own, like every other kid. Of course, he's at the party school of Texas right now, so great. But I mean, it's just, I think they have to go and figure that stuff out, just like every other teenager. And once you get down a little bit, you see, wait a minute, this does make sense, or
Yeah, and those discussions get better as just in a couple more years, they get better. I've had really interesting political conversations, all three of mine, over the last several years. And I think one of the things we found is we make assumptions about things. We make assumptions about each other that aren't fair. And so the dialogues have been actually pretty good. And sometimes I like to throw things out there to them just to stir them up. Not that I necessarily believe it, just to throw the bone out there, just to make the conversation more lively and make both of us think. And so that's fun too. But from a spiritual viewpoint, I think this passage is relevant. What are we trying to do? We want to be well prepared. So how has parenting been impacted by the whole concept of safety? These guys would say parents are going to ludicrous lengths to take the bumps out of life for their children. However, parental hyper-concern has a net effect of making kids more fragile. So that whole the snowplow parenting thing that we talked about, I'm gonna plow ahead and clear the way for you, where you won't have to experience these bumps. And these guys are arguing that's making your student more fragile and have less ability to cope with the real world, to have coping skills by plowing ahead. And this, I think, hyper concern is a really good term. And I don't know, I don't recall, parents that had kids the same age as ours, I don't recall that being really pronounced. Well, I don't know what y'all's experience has been having younger children, if you see a lot of that hyper concern and helicopter parenting and snowplow parenting. It's Jamie saying yes. I don't remember that, or maybe I just have a short memory. But I don't recall that when our kids were little.
I think it's gotten worse.
Oh, yeah. In elementary, I mean, I can sit with a group of moms who are like, she has not put in grades for 2 weeks, and I'm like, what? And, because they're checking Skyward every day, and they are emailing those teachers, and it starts in elementary. And it doesn't stop. And that's a small thing.
Yeah, you need to really talk to some of the.
Educators in the room.
Educators. You think there aren't those parents because.
They would
oh
have
my.
tales, yeah, they would have tales to tell.
Oh.
Well, I think that they're also craving human connection.
Oh, I don't think there's any
Yes.
doubt about it.
Yeah, they're craving human connection. I mean, I do this a lot with people who are in the teenage years, but just getting eye contact with them and calling them by their name, I mean, it just turns their light on, and it's quite amazing. I wonder if they feel a lot like just an automaton in a lost system, you know, and just trying to find a way to make sense of their lives.
I have found with kids that I encounter, of course, so many of these kids are not coming from a family of Ward and June Cleaver as
Yeah,
parents.
exactly.
And they're coming from some pretty extraordinary backgrounds. And those kids that I've encountered, man, they've latched on, and if you'll, show them some attention. I have a kid who lives in San Angelo, and his mom went to school with me in high school, and I met him at a school reunion years ago when he was a little boy. He's 26 now, he's the age of our youngest. He texts me at least once a week, tell me he's in heating and air conditioning school, started this Monday. He just texts me, let me know he's going to school. Hey, and just simple, I'm proud of you, I'm so glad, we just have those conversations about once a week. And he's latched on, and has for several years, because there was no male at all on his radar. So you're right. Now he's kind of Generation Z millennial. He's right there on the line. He's a super neat kid, and really neat kid. So I think you're right. They are very relational. Millennials are too. If you'll try, I found if I try, they reach back, and they'll communicate with you. But you gotta try. You gotta work at it.
It's gotta be an in-face thing.
It did, I agree. In face, in person.
Yes.
The more, and sometimes if they live in San Angelo, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's
But if you can, in face, in person, that's why I'm gonna mentor at GMS again this year. I had a ball last year.
Yeah.
It was a blast. And I tell you what, y'all ought to see Jeff Jeffries. That guy, he is fantastic. And he had 2 kids. And he had the same hour I did with one of those kids, and I tell you what, I could have just sat back and watched him and just kept my mouth shut and learned a lot, because he is top notch, really does a good job. So the truth is, kids are not anti-fragile. We adults actually make them fragile. If adults panic and quickly rush the child, they're conditioned to panic as well, so they mirror our emotions. So there's that balance. You don't want to be overly protective, but yet the other thing, I don't want to expose my kids to things they don't need to be exposed to. And so this is what hit me this afternoon. My first job, I went to work at 16 in a full service car wash, where it was the automatic car wash, but we wiped the cars down. We also sold gas too, so you fill the cars up with gas, send them to the car wash. The guy I worked for, that was our boss, was probably one of the most decadent, immoral people I have known in my entire adult life, as I look back on that. And I've thought several times, and I kind of laughed to myself, if my mother knew what I was picking up from him and the things he was saying, and his outlook on life and his outlook about all kinds of things, she would have done a triple backflip and then had a stroke after that, if she'd have known that. And I think I was exposed to things I probably should not have been exposed to at age 16. Now, it all worked out. I worked for him for 2 years. He's just really not a good person. The last conversation I had with him was 10 or 12 years ago. I was coming back from Garland from a DPS meeting, and he called out of the blue. We talked the whole way back from Garland. We talked for about an hour and a half on the phone, and he passed away just a few months after that. And I went to his funeral, and went back to Post. He was from Post, and I went back to Post for his funeral. But not a good influence. So there's that side of it. Okay, I don't want to put my kids with people that I really don't think are going to be good for them. I don't want to do that on purpose. So that's not a good idea. me working for him was probably not a good idea. But on the other hand, I also don't want to be overprotective either. So there's some kind of semblance of balance. I don't know what it is, but
Depends on your kid too.
yeah, it depends on the personality of the kid.
The thing of it is, once they're out of your eyesight, you have no control.
That's true. That's true. You know, I went to work for this guy. My dad passed away in March of '78. I went to work at the car wash there in July. And my mom had a few things on her mind. You know, 4 months after my dad died, she had a little bit on her mind. And so I was wanting a job because I had my driver's license and I wanted spending money and things I could do. And yeah, she knew that the things we were doing, she would have flipped. So, you know, I think my kids were actually, comparative to me, my kids were really pretty good. That's the mother's genes, that helped a lot.
And yet everybody has that story about if my parents only knew what I did.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Like I told y'all last week, the first night I had my driver's license, I took my mom's Oldsmobile on the loop in Lubbock and opened it up, see how fast it'd go. You know, but that was just the tip of the iceberg of the things that we did. But I will say this, we sure had fun. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to talk about, what I'm going to go into next is, there is no shortage of knowledge. These kids are exposed to so much information about every subject. So most Gen Z students, you can have an intelligent conversation with them about so many topics because they're just exposed to so much. They know a lot. My kids blow me away at how much they know about all kinds of different things because they've just had so much exposure. Another thing I find interesting, even my own kids, their music tastes are very diverse. And so I'll tell them, oh, I know this song from the '70s, you know, wouldn't know it. Oh yeah, I know that artist, and I know the song. And by the way, it came out in May of 1979. I'm like, how'd you know that? I just know. You know, but they have this broad base, and of course they think my appreciation for music is way too limited. Which they're true. You know, it's true, but they think I should be more like them and have a broader taste of things like that. So there's no shortage of knowledge at all. So we're now raising and teaching an empowered generation means they have access to all kinds of technology, innovation, video content, and information, whether they're psychologically ready for it or not. There you go. So YouTube, you can learn lots of cool stuff on YouTube. TikTok, lots of short stuff, little short snippets on TikTok. You know, you can Google whatever you want to Google. But that means your child who's going to Bacchus or Acton Elementary, they're probably learning some advanced things that we probably didn't know until we were in middle school or high school, or maybe even older. So they're exposed to everything, but are they emotionally and psychologically ready for it? And there's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and the ability to discern and sift through things. Kids don't have that, when they're younger, kids don't have the ability to synthesize and sift through things because their brains aren't developed to do that like an adult would. There's still a lot of brain development that needs to go on, a lot of maturity that needs to occur. So lots of exposure. So they're overexposed to information far early than they're ready. Would y'all agree that there's way too much stuff out there? And yet they're underexposed to firsthand experiences far later than they're ready. Okay, and I put on here examples of the question mark. So can y'all think of areas where kids are underexposed with firsthand, and I'm thinking hands-on, having life experience that they're not getting enough of?
Paying bills.
I'm sorry?
Paying bills.
Paying bills, okay, being responsible. Okay, so when I was 16, and I wanted, I'm going to say an expensive pair of jeans. My mom would say, get after it, use your own money.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, I'd save my money and go buy those expensive jeans that I wanted. Actually, this is embarrassing to tell. but this is during the disco era. And I wanted some little black stacked heels is what we call them.
We need to see pictures.
And my mom said, yeah, and this is when we bought them at Anthony's, which later became Bell's. But anyhow, we went to Anthony's in Lubbock over on 50th Street. My debate partner and I went and bought it. We wanted some little stacked heels. We had black suits. They were called Angels-like suits, had vests and everything. Man, we thought we were just about the coolest thing ever created. But my mom, all that stuff, she'd like, get after it. Use your car wash money. So that's a good one, you know, paying bills, paying your own way.
Hard day's work, like throwing hay
Okay,
bales.
just good old fashioned labor.
That's what I was thinking of, like
Really?
farm kids, driving
Sweat.
combines.
Right.
Knowing how to back a trailer, knowing how to direct somebody about, stuff like that, that will, you know, that, oh, they can't be behind a car now, it's too dangerous, or they can't. I follow this lady on Instagram who they like run their farm, and she's got a 4-year-old who's hooking up the trailer and backing her up. And it was awesome. And that's, I mean, how many 4-year-olds could do that?
There's some value in just old fashioned work.
Yeah.
And farm, yeah, being on a farm and having that experience is phenomenal.
Or simply just chores and housework.
Who's driving a tractor.
Yeah, there you go. But I
Nancy,
mean,
how old were you when
now-
you started driving tractors?
How often do you do that?
That's probably about 12.
About
It's
12.
child labor, don't put it up YouTube anymore, you're in trouble.
12.
They're gonna flag you.
Well, and they don't know the difference between wants and needs.
Yes,
Okay.
that's a good one.
I mean, and I don't know how, you can't teach that, they have to learn.
Yeah, I think one of the gifts we can give, I think, even in a church setting, is to help kids have some hands-on experience. Take them with you. Go do some things that are hands-on. Take a kid hunting, take a kid fishing, you know, if you like those kind of things, because I think there's kids that aren't having those kind of outdoor, hands-on kinds of experiences. And I think that's invaluable in terms of not just first-hand experience.
How about getting yourself up in the morning instead of having mom come in and get you up every morning? You've got to get yourself up and get yourself started for the day. And that's, a lot of that's not happening either, you know.
What'd your dad do, Nancy? I've heard this story before. What'd your dad do to get you to be up?
Oh.
Well, if we weren't up by a certain time that we were supposed to be, we didn't have carpet in our bedroom. It was linoleum. And he would pull us out of bed and lay us on that cold floor.
My dad did that too.
We learned to get up before Dad came in
There
there.
we go.
Grab you by your feet.
I also think a lot of, especially American children, are underexposed to, how do I want to put this?
Anything hard?
No, they're underexposed to minimalism. Oh man, yes,
It's a party line.
they're underexposed to minimalism.
To
To minimalism. I mean,
Very materialistic.
oh my goodness, yes. I mean, I have a whole bus full of toys that I would love to just donate, and they've been living in the bus which would be our garage, for a year. And it's like, but I can't get rid of them. I get in trouble.
But they rotate. I'm ready to put this
Yeah.
together.
Oh, it's just like, seriously, it's just lavish.
So on that note, Militia, I think that if we can give our kids some cross-cultural experiences out of the country or in any kind of cross-cultural experience, it's not gonna hurt them any.
No, I don't think so.
One of the things I know my kids got really irritated, I would make them go with me to go visit people from church in the nursing home.
Oh, okay.
And they thought the place smelled awful.
Yeah.
And now this one place we took them in Oklahoma, it was bad. The state later closed it down.
Oh.
And it was bad. And so as the boys got older, they threatened to put me there when I got older.
What you said, I'm building that about cross-culture stuff. I'm telling you, we took Alex with us to South Texas to the mission trip. The things that he learned and observed were extremely valuable. It made him reflect on where he was, where he is, and where other people are. And that's life-changing.
And to be in an environment where not everybody speaks English and you gotta figure out a way to function because you don't speak the language. And you gotta figure out a way, how do I ask them where the restroom is? You're gonna have to figure it out. You know, use hand signals, do what you gotta do, but figure it out. You know, you want some ketchup with your meal and the waitress doesn't speak English, you better figure it out, you know, and.
I think our kids relate, like what she was saying about things. I think they relate what they have to their happiness. And one of the most life-changing things for me as an adult was going with our youth group kids when we would go down to Casa de Esperanza in Mexico. And so the PE teacher at school would let me borrow, you know, the parachute. Just stuff that our kids it was nothing. And we would take that stuff down there, not to leave it, just for them to play with while we were there. And they were amazed. And every night as we gathered together as a group of our kids and grown-ups that went, the takeaway every single day, every year I ever went with them was, I can't believe these kids have nothing and they're so happy. And they were shocked at that.
And they're
Just
innovative.
because,
And they're innovative.
yes.
When you have nothing, there's so much more that you do with what you have.
But it
It's
did just make me
amazing.
realize how much we equate things with happiness.
You gotta get out of your own little bubble.
It's-
Anything you can do to get out of your own little bubble, whatever that bubble looks like, I think is a good experience.
For sure.
Well, tying the two together, like taking this back to its most basic level, there's like a whole wave of child education books right now. They're saying parts of kids' brains actually aren't developing because they're not going outside and playing and having this free creative play where, you know, they're being handed stuff. They're like, do this, and parts of their brain actually aren't developing. They're being underexposed to this.
And you know, that could have consequences for generations.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Because then they
That's-
don't know how to teach.
There is no
them.
creativity. It's
And they don't know how
education is
to-
like a color by numbers education.
Fill their time on their own, or to comfort themselves, or do a lot of those basic skills that they need to learn.
That's a
Is
little
anybody
scary.
gonna quilt anymore? That's what I wonder.
We're gonna send them to you, Melissa.
Okay.
We'll clear that.
How do you, I guess, how do you keep it from being a throwaway generation too?
That's a good point. A throwaway generation.
Listen, it's like,
I don't know.
time
That's my.
divided up into 80-year sections with 4 20-year generations within, and it seems to be cyclical every 80 years, and the Generation Z is gonna be, the next version of the Bob Dylans and the artists from back in the, that came from the early 60s.
And so that says the millennial, and according to this, it's a book called The Fourth Turning.
The Fourth Turning's a great book.
Oh, so you've read it?
Yeah, it's an
Okay,
excellent
cool,
book.
yeah. And it's up to us, we're the millennials are
Yeah.
the ones that are gonna have to pull us through
Yeah,
it so that
the
they can
point
have
of
their
the
renaissance.
Strauss and Strauss, have written, from generation to generation, wrote The Fourth Turning. And their point is that generational stuff is cyclical, and that you go through cycles and stuff. I need to go back and reread it, it's really good. So consequences, and this is a fact. Adolescence is expanding on both sides. In other words, kids are going into adolescence much younger, but adolescent behavior is continuing to the mid-20s, at least, and later for boys, even into the late 20s. And talking about brain development, that frontal cortex where their judgment part of your brain is, it's slower to develop because of all these things we just talked about. So they're entering adolescence to elementary school and often remain in adolescence well in their 20s, unready for adult responsibility. And so if you talk to administrators at universities, they're having to adapt and be prepared for 18-year-olds that are coming to live in a dorm with a roommate and adapt to what we're describing right here. So it's a challenge. So students are biologically advanced in the sense of bodies are reaching puberty earlier, cognitively advanced or knowledgeable about many topics we already talked about, but emotionally behind, their emotional intelligence is underdeveloped. That's where the rub is, and I think that's the challenge we have, to help the kids' emotional intelligence be cultivated. And I think some of the things we've just talked about here tonight are the solutions. To have cross-cultural experiences, to teach them about working, how to back a trailer, common sense sort of things, all the above. Actually, I think that like working on the farm kind of things that doesn't seem like it would develop emotional intelligence, but it does, because it builds confidence and it teaches your brain to develop in different ways.
It's actually the parent taking the time to spend it with,
Invest.
invest.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right, Fidel, and if I could go back, I wish I could get a redo. Y'all want redos? I need a redo. I would go back and.
No, I don't wanna redo it. Actually, I'm redoing now, I don't know what I'm thinking.
You're getting a redo.
Yeah, I am doing a redo.
We bought into the lies, parents, younger parents. Quality time trumps quantity time.
Right, right.
Not true.
Yeah, and how much time and what you're doing with them, doing meaningful things. I'm a Charles Martin fanatic. He's a fiction author, and I've read almost everything he's written. I'm reading one called Chasing Fireflies right now. And the storyline is about a guy, it's about an adult who was raised in foster care and a child who is in foster care, who's a little boy about 10 years old, and the life of the foster dad. And the character of the foster dad, he is the most amazing guy. A little rough around the edges in some ways, has had a hard life, but the creative ways that he has reached out to 2 generations of kids in foster care, it's a great book. It's a good read. And so, very inspired by it.
I think along with what you were saying, talking to our children. I can remember when our children, we were gonna give some bunk beds away that someone had given us, and they were kind of, and I said, your friends are sleeping in tents, they have no, they were happy for them to, and we have children coming in from a children's home. Every one of those children have been through some major experience to be there. And I think just all of us as adults will pass on to our children to be aware of that. And as Manel was saying, they see when they went, to Mexico, but just talking to our kids and helping them kind of understand to be sensitive to others.
So I think one of the responsibilities we have is to foster the cultivation of empathy. That our kids can empathize with kids that aren't like them, who've had different life experiences than they've had. That not everybody's like them, which that's a challenge. And they're gonna get some of that at school, hopefully, if that's fostered. That's a part of emotional intelligence, is cultivating empathy. Not everybody looks like me and lives in the same home I did, and all those things. See if we got time for one more. Some quick stats, and we'll wrap it up. Fewer 12th graders went out on a date in 2015 than 8th graders did in 2009. Now, how many of y'all parents let you date in the 8th grade? Probably not. So that's a small number. So kids going out and quote unquote dating, that's changed. That's changed a lot in the last 2015, the majority of 16-year-olds now have a driver's license. I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure if it's a majority, but I will say it's a higher number. We talked about that last week in here. At 16, kids aren't all that enthused about getting their driver's license. Man, I was chomping at the bit. I was ready to go. There is a big world for me to see, and I'm going to drive myself to get there. In 1979, only 22% of seniors did not work a job. By 2010s is about half. That's pretty close. So my first job was at the car wash, and then I sacked groceries at Safeway. I learned, now even though I worked for a guy at the car wash, it probably wasn't, the most upstanding person. I learned some things about meeting the public and dealing with people at 16 that were good lessons. And at Safeway, there were even better lessons about meeting people and dealing with the public. And I had coworkers at Safeway that were a wide scope of people that were different, that I had to adapt and learn how to work for them. In 2016, the most common living arrangements for 18 to 34-year-olds was with their parents. So, now, all
That's a
three of
scary
ours are
thought.
pretty independent
I mean, really.
and ready to go. Boy, now we're about to expire on our oldest, he's 33, so maybe we can get past 34. So, anyhow, we'll leave on those statistics and pick up next week. Thank you very